Educational opportunities were starting to become more readily available in the late 1800s as well. Free public education was firmly entrenched in America, and increasingly America's poor and oppressed saw education as a means to a better life. Public schools were created with free textbooks, all funded by taxpayers, which hadn't been the case. Americans increasingly saw formal education as a solution to poverty. By 1900, there were 6,000 high schools in the United States. There are 18,435 of them today, probably a little more. Catholic schools also grew in number. By 1874, the Chautauqua movement had come along, a movement aimed at educating adults through public lectures and at-home studies. It reached its peak in the late 19th and early 20th centuries. It was described by Theodore Roosevelt as the most American thing in America. It brought culture, entertainment, and education to rural communities across the United States. So it was started in 1874 by a Methodist minister named John Hale Vincent and businessman Lewis Miller at Lake Chautauqua, I hope I'm saying that right, New York. And it began as a summer training assembly for Sunday school teachers. Its scope broadened, obviously, beyond religious instruction to include the four pillars: arts, education, recreation, and religion. The mother Chautauqua, and again, I hope I'm saying that right, the original site in New York became the permanent Chautauqua institution, which still operates today. And some of the key components of this program, the Literary and Scientific Circle, which was founded in 1878. This was the first national book club and correspondence course in the United States, allowing people to earn a diploma through a 4-year home reading program. There were independent daughter Chautauquas, permanent sites modeled after the original sprang up in locations like Boulder, Colorado, and Lakeside, Ohio. And there were tent versions as well that started in 1904. Traveling tent shows brought culture under canvas to thousands of small towns. These featured famous speakers like William Jennings Bryan, musicians, and even Broadway plays. So the movement is credited with pioneering modern adult education and university extension programs. It served as a vital platform for discussing contemporary social issues like women's suffrage, temperance, and child labor laws. The popularity of the movement declined in the 1930s due to the rise of radio, motion pictures, and the automobile, which made information and entertainment more accessible at home. The most American thing in America. Southern blacks rarely received an education in the years following the Civil War. Booker T. Washington, who was an ex-slave, ran the Tuskegee Institute in Alabama to teach blacks useful skills for trades. George Washington Carver, who was one of Booker T. Washington's students, discovered hundreds of uses for peanuts, sweet potatoes, and soybeans. Washington believed if blacks earned economic equality, then social and political equality would eventually follow. At the bottom of education, he says, at the bottom of politics, even at the bottom of religion, there must be, for our race, economic independence. W.E.B. Du Bois, and yes, I am pronouncing that right, I double-checked. He was the first black PhD graduate from Harvard, and he demanded immediate equality for blacks. Colleges sprouted up after the Civil War. Some were specifically for women or for blacks. We had here in Lincoln, up until 2022, Lincoln College, which was a predominantly black institution, serviced many students from the city of Chicago. And sadly, that closed due to a combination of COVID and a cyber attack that it just couldn't recover from. So in 1862, the Morrill Land Act provided generous grants of public lands to states for support of education. And in 1887, the Hatch Act came along and provided federal funds for the creation of agricultural experimentation in universities. The act initially provided $15,000 annually to each state and territory that had established a land grant college under the Morrill Act of 1862. Stations were tasked with conducting experiments on plant and animal physiology, soil and water analysis, diseases, and the chemical composition of manures and fertilizers. They required stations to publish free bulletins at least once every 3 months, to share findings with farmers and local newspapers. Modern versions of the Act generally require states to match federal Hatch funds on a 1-to-1 basis. The historical significance of the Hatch Act being primarily scientific advancement because it transforms farming from a traditional practice into a science-based industry, leading to major breakthroughs like hybrid corn, the eradication of bovine tuberculosis, improved soil conservation, and the Act is still in effect today, providing capacity grants administered by the USDA, National Institute of Food and Agriculture, for research on modern challenges like food security, biotechnology, and sustainable agriculture. Duke University, founded by James Buchanan Duke. So private donations to colleges grew as wealthy industrialists sought to support education. So Cornell, Ezra Cornell, very rich individual. University of Chicago here in Illinois, founded by John D. Rockefeller. And Johns Hopkins, was the first top-notch graduate school here in the United States. And that's it for the Gilded Age.